Hello and welcome to the Dapper Gaffer channel. I'm Josiah and we're here at City Stage Studios in Rockford, Illinois, taking a look at the CF12 Fresnel from Aputure today and having a discussion about hard light, such as what's keying me right now and what you see going on in the background. Aputure did send us this Fresnel at our request, and we do get to keep it, but we can also say whatever we want about it in this review. And I did purchase some other accessories along with this for the test today that did not come with it, so we'll get into that. So this Fresnel is purpose-built for the new Storm series fixtures, the 1000C, 1200X, but is also retro-compatible to the 1200D, the 600C series, and I think another fixture too in their lineup. So usually when I'm going to grab a Fresnel, I'm grabbing it for the quality of light that it puts out, not necessarily the intensity. And that's a bit of a common misconception today, I feel like, is that Fresnels give you more output. That's not necessarily the case. In fact, it's often the opposite versus using, for instance, the faceted reflectors that come with these lights as well. So that's why we're doing hard light today, to demonstrate the shadows, just kind of the spread of the light, and just see how it performs. So this Fresnel comes in a nice soft case, like a lot of Aputure stuff does, similar sort of build. And they've made it big enough so that you can actually fit the Barndoors in it as well. They don't come with it, but if you take out a piece of foam inside, that will fit in, even mounted to the Fresnel itself. Mounted or detached, it fits in there. Nice protection for that thing if you want to transport it like that. All right, why don't we pop this thing on a fixture? Nate, can you bring that 1000C in? Boom, there it is. We rehearsed this. Thank you. Now you'll notice I can put that lens on this fixture, as well as the Barndoors if I wanted to, while it's sitting on a flat surface, which is a great design choice. And it's all thanks to this skid that Aputure has designed for the 1000C and the 1200X. It's compatible with either one. So this is definitely a heavier setup all built like this, but it just feels like a real tool, that you're gonna put to work. Very similar form factor to what, if you're an older gaffer, you might be used to with an HMI setup. It's very similar to that, like an M18 sort of size, a little heavier actually, but it's great to have it all in one unit. And then with that skid on the bottom, I can set it right on the cart with the Fresnel and Barndoors on it, and it's ready to go. And then I can keep 2 ballasts in 1 milk crate with its GAC. It's a nice option to have. I think this is a great addition to the light because it allows me to have this unit fairly pre-built. I still have to connect the head cable and the ballast, but at least I don't have to put the lens on, put the Barndoors on, and do that all on a stand. Like I can have this pre-built sitting on a head cart or on a shelf, something like that. It's just a lot more ready to go, saves time. And honestly, I feel like most of the time that I'm gonna use a fixture like this, I'm gonna use it with a Fresnel anyways. So kudos to Aputure with putting this out there as an option. Now it doesn't come with a light. If you were to buy the Cine kit, that includes the Fresnel, the skid, and the Barndoors, but you can also buy them, each one of those individually, if you are not as big of a fan of it as I am. So to the design of the Fresnel itself, I like a lot of the things that Aputure's doing here. These oversized nubs on here make it easy to adjust the focus on this with one hand if needed, which is great if you're on a ladder or something like that. Moves fairly easily. Goes from 45 to 15. It is really a very compact design for a 12-inch Fresnel. And to compare it to, for instance, the F10 Fresnel, which was designed for 600D, 300D. It is lighter. I think it was 8 pounds, eight-ish versus like 10 pounds. So this is a little bit heavier, but just the weight distribution of this and kind of the overall build kind of just feels heavier in hand than this one does, just being such a slim profile. So I like the direction that they're going with that. But something else you'll notice is that while they're calling this a Fresnel, it's actually not a Fresnel at all. It's functioning in a similar way to how a Fresnel functions. This is an actual Fresnel designed actually for lighthouses originally, casting the light out over the sea, but it's a stepped spherical lens. It's like sections stepped of a spherical lens that make up this Fresnel. And on this design, they had a second optical element in here that did a great job of really optimizing this Fresnel for the 600 series fixtures, and did a lot of good things. But this does seem to be taking it to the next level. If it's not a Fresnel, what is it? Well, it's actually a lenticular lens. So if you're familiar with like the books or like pictures that we had as kids where you turn it one way and you can kind of see one picture and turn it the other way and see another one, that's actually what they've used for this front element on here, only in a circular pattern versus one direction like we would with those pictures. And then they've coupled that instead of with a intensifying, just clear element like we had in that other one. It's kind of like a stippled piece of glass in there. Probably does some manner of intensifying or optimization of some sort. Let's take a look at the Barndoors for this bad boy. Kind of an interesting design on these as well. Nice flat overall profile, as you can see. It has this little latch on here. You push that in, and it kind of latches in place. And then once we put it on the light, we push that button, which pops that back out and holds it into place. So a little different design than what I've seen before. I'll just pop that out, slides on and grabs like the outer lip on this Fresnel. Then we push that button, it's locked into place. And then it's got this addition of a safety chain that you can put on as well. In my instance, I'm just gonna wrap it around the skid, but you could also put it around there if you don't use the skid. And we can, this isn't gonna rotate all the way, while it's sitting on the table. Probably not gonna need to do that. On a stand, obviously it would. See, open up these doors, big doors on this thing, and it's got these extra reliefs to control more of that spill. It's just good design. You can, if you've got your doors a little wider, you can eliminate some of that spill with those fins, close it in. And another thing I like about this design is, and this might not be something you immediately think of with an LED fixture, but you can actually still put scrims in here. Why would you want to do that? Well, let me grab a scrim and I'll tell you why. So there's probably not a whole lot of reason to use just a regular scrim like this. Cuts the intensity of the light. Maybe the only situation I would see to use that is the low end dimming isn't low enough for you. You can get it dimmer with something like this. But at that point, I'm kind of like, are you using the right fixture? I don't know. However, what is really handy is to use half scrims like this. A half single, a half double. And what you can do with these, and the design of this is it's got this little piece that clicks in and out there. Set it inside, whoop, just like that, and then lock it into place like so. This gives you the ability to feather light. For instance, if you're shooting this hard light along a wall, from the side, this will help feather the side that's closest to the fixture. So if we were shooting across this far wall here, we'd put it on this side. being closer to this wall, and as the light gets further away, you let it spill more. So it just kind of helps even that out. I still like to use these on occasion, and it saves the stand over having to put an open scrim out in front of it. It's a nice option that they give you the ability to put one in there if you want to. And a clever little low profile design way of snapping it in there. And for those that are wondering, this is the same size scrim as your M18. So if you've got some scrims from an M18, or you want to find some scrims for this thing, look for M18 size scrims and they'll fit right in there. So what we got set up here is another 1000C on this stand with a 45-degree reflector pushing light through this flat. And you can see that it gives us the idea of that pattern of the window cast on the wall, but it's not really all that clean. You know, you kind of get this double shadowing stuff going on. We might want sharper shadows than that. So the general concept when you're trying to push light through the windows or anything that's, you know, creating a pattern for you, generally the wider your lens is or the wider your reflector is, the sharper the shadows are going to be, and obviously the further away from your window or cucoloris or whatever it is, the light, however, the greater distance you have between that and your light, the sharper the shadows are going to be on the other side. So let's see what it does if we keep this setup all the same, but we just swap it out with the CF12 Fresnel on this thing. Almost bayonet style locking system on there. And this does go to 45 degrees, which is the same angle as that reflector that we had on here. So putting this all back into position, we should have something pretty similar to compare. I'm seeing that the pattern looks different. Cleaner shadows, not as much double shadowing going on, but still not overly sharp. Compared to other Fresnels that size, like a 12-inch Fresnel, it's about what I would expect out of a Fresnel that size. The smaller the Fresnel is, the sharper the shadows are going to be as well. Obviously, we have a lot more spill to deal with at this point. So why don't we, since we have Barndoors for this thing, put those on and see what that does for us. I'm going to shut this off just so I'm not blinding myself as I try to slide it on. Boom, locked into place. Other nice thing about LEDs, you don't have to worry about that hot restrike issue that you do with HMIs. Rotate this, and this will enable me to just rough cut off the edges there. You can see we still get a little leak. It's kind of, they do cut pretty well though. If I wanted to completely eliminate that leak off the left-hand side, probably have to be about there with it. But I'm also shrinking the amount of light that's coming through when I do that. So Barndoors are great for speed, roughing something in. The other issue is if we had more wall to deal with here, like if this was a real house, we wouldn't be worried so much about flagging it that close to the edge. Right now, we've only got this much space. So why don't we fly in another floppy here just to extend this wall? You can see it is cutting the light pretty well, but it's hard to be real precise without cutting too much light out of this unit. Okay, so we've just extended our wall here. Now I don't have to be quite so precise with these Barndoor cuts. I can just rough it in. We're still getting kind of the full lens, maximize our output. And let's take a look at this shadow on the wall. Now that's looking pretty nice. Look how much sharper we're getting, being that further distance away. Really some much more natural shadows. Look at that. That's pretty nice. especially for a big old 12-inch Fresnel like that. So the temptation might be to spot this in, to increase the intensity of the light, which it will do that for you, but at the sacrifice of sharpness. And let me show you what that difference looks like. See how I can do this with one hand? This is great. I love that. So you can see we get a lot more intensity out of it, but look at how much those shadows softened when we did that. Just have nowhere near the definition we were getting at the wide end of it. We almost have to be like this close to kind of have a similar level of sharpness out of it. The same will go for the reflectors. It's not unique to Fresnels. So at the moment we have this spotted into its full spot 15 degrees, which conveniently is the same angle that the narrow reflector for this light is at as well, 15 degrees. Slots in there with the Barndoors on it. It's a nice design. One very notable difference about using this versus the Fresnel is the weight factor. This is way lighter, even though it sticks off the light a lot farther. All right, let's take a look at what that does for our light pattern here. Ooh, that's funky. Yeah, look at that. Just really weird, multifaceted shadows going on. And that's why in my mind I'm always like, let's go for the Fresnel. It's pretty much gonna always give us a nicer result. So that's a pretty clear demonstration of that. But in this instance, it's not only the fact that we've narrowed the field of light that we're throwing out, but it's the fact that we're using that faceted reflector instead of Fresnel that's leading to this kind of funky pattern going on there. Quick recap on that. If you want sharper shadows when you're pushing light through windows, move the light further away from the window and flood it out or use a wider reflector. If your tendency is to spot in to get more intensity out of the light, obviously it's going to do that, but you sacrifice the sharpness of the shadows at the same time. Bigger Fresnels are going to be harder to get sharper, but they do push out more light. So there's always a trade-off, and you just kind of have to dance between those different parameters to try to dial in as close as you can with whatever you're trying to go for. And that's the fun part about being a gaffer. Everyone's looking for you to get what they want, and you have to figure out a way to make it happen. A lot of things I'm liking about this Fresnel, design-wise, it's great, but it does kind of draw attention to another issue that I feel like we have with this fixture design is look at how much weight is off to the front end of this fixture when we have this thing full spotted in with the Barndoors. Like I'm not concerned at all about this brake being strong enough to hold it because it totally is. I mean, you can see the metal bending before like this brake actually lets loose. And we can put massive soft boxes on there and it's gonna be just fine. That's not gonna let loose. But the issue I have is with a fixture like this, in a format where I'm probably gonna largely leave it built with the Fresnel and the Barndoors on that, similar to like if I was using an M18 that you just pull off the head cart. I would love to see the weight of this thing somehow better balanced over the center of the mounting point on this light, because with the softbox, you kind of expect that you're just gonna have to put extra bags on it and be careful and all that. But with a fixture like this, I'd love to see the weight centered so I don't have to think about that as much, especially when I'm running it up higher. It makes me hesitant to use the top tier on these combos because I know that top tier is the weakest one and it's gonna wanna bend that tier on the stand. In my opinion, kind of unnecessarily. So I'm not entirely sure what the answer to that problem is. Like maybe we need to get away from this curved yoke design. The idea of that is that we can tilt down further. I get that, that's nice to have, or maybe having this be reversible to help to help balance it, or I've seen some other manufacturers have like a sliding sort of mount point on here to kind of accommodate for the accessories that you put on the front. So that's something I'd love to see in the next evolution of these fixtures, is a better way to center the weight of this over the mounting point, and that's going to help us on stands, when we're rigging, in all sorts of situations. We've set these up side by side so we can do some quick bump comparisons of what the reflector is doing for this light versus the Fresnel. These are both 1000 Cs set at the same intensity, and what we're looking at is the spread of the light on the wall as well as the intensity. So first off, we've got the 45-degree reflector on this guy and the matching 45-degree angle, which is full flood on the spot. And looking at the wall there, as we bump between these, that is a reflector, that is the Fresnel. Pretty similar light spread at the wide end of the spectrum. The only thing that I'm noticing that is a little odd with the Fresnel is this on the floor. See how it's got this kind of light leak? Here, this is a little different. It must have something to do with that lenticular lens that they're using. That's not something you really see from a Fresnel. So I was just immediately noticing that as I was bumping between them. That might be an issue. Let me just quickly put the Barndoors on it and see if that mitigates it at all. Yeah, you could see that largely eliminates that issue if you have them closed in at all. If they're open, it actually doesn't help. But yeah, you can pretty easily eliminate that if you need to. Is that going to be a big issue? Probably not, but it's just something I noticed. It's kind of casting this ring of light just down here and presumably the same direction all the way around. So something to keep in mind. Not a big issue in my mind. Take those doors back off of there. Don't really need it for this part of the show. Another subtle difference that we're seeing is that that's the reflector, that's the Fresnel. If you can see these, the one on this side is this light, the one on this side is that one, as I'm switching between these. The reflector actually seems to be a little bit cleaner at the edges color-wise, whereas I'm seeing on the Fresnel, we're getting a slight shift. Vic is telling me it looks pretty green on camera. To the eye, it really is not something that stood out to me significantly, but I am going from increasing by about 0.2 on the green magenta scale as we go to the edge. Maybe we'll just check the reflector too. I don't feel like I see that as much on the reflector to eye. How does that look on camera, Vic?
Better.
Yeah. Maybe like a 0.1 shift to the green at the edges, but yeah, a little less pronounced than the Fresnel. Aputure does have a lot of readings available, comparing the intensity of these lights at different color temperatures, both with the reflector barrels and the Fresnel on it. So we're not going to go that in depth with this, but I'll just tell you that the reflector dishes are more efficient, like you'll get a little bit more output out of them than you will out of the Fresnel. The one that I didn't see tested in their stats was the 30-degree medium barrel dish. So we will run a test on that versus the Fresnel. Let's step it up to the medium reflector at 30 degrees. Turn this one on so you can see it as I spot it in. And we'll just match what is telling me is a 30-degree angle on the lens here, which is right there. Now if we bump between these, still looks pretty similar. There's actually a little more fall off at the edges, more of a graduated fall off on the Fresnel than on that medium reflector. You can see that. It does seem like that reflector is kind of noticeably brighter. So we'll take a reading on that one just to see what it's doing. So right now this is the reflector dish, and this is not max intensity we're testing, we're just testing at the same output level which one is brighter. I'm reading 11 and 5/10 or 11 and a half. And can you bump it to the other light there, Kiko? And now we're on the Fresnel, 11 and 2/10, or the foot candle reading. Yeah, so you are getting more light out of the reflector. 216 foot candles. Can you bump it back to the other one again? Versus 277. So we're getting about 28% more output out of the reflector at the same angle over the Fresnel. But that's kind of to be expected. Like we talked about earlier, Fresnels are not necessarily about maximizing output. They're about making the quality of the light nicer. Now we're going to go maximum power with the narrow reflector, 15 degrees on each one of these. See how big that reflector is, but still very lightweight. It's bigger than the reflector off of the 1200D. All right, spot this into 15. Wow. So that's a much more defined circle than you would typically see out of a Fresnel this size. I like that. That's cool. I mean, that's a very, very sharp edges, honestly, for, well, it's technically not a Fresnel, as we discussed, but for this lens, that's cool. I like that. I like how defined that is at the edges. Very tight pattern there. Let's compare that to the narrow reflector. Wow. Okay, so this is saying that this is a 15-degree reflector, and this is also at 15 degrees, but look at the difference in the light on the wall. I can see that, so this is the reflector we're looking at now. Obviously, much more spill than we're getting out of the Fresnel at that spot level. You can see that there is kind of this hot spot in the middle. So that's maybe that kind of hot spot area is what they're defining at as that 15-degree circle of light there. But yeah, that's the most significant difference between the reflectors and the Fresnel that of these three we've compared. So I really like what the Fresnel is doing at that long end. Get a lot more control. Plus, obviously, we have more control at all levels with this because we can put the Barndoors on it, whereas we can't do that with the reflectors. You can put cinefoil on it or something like that, which I've done before, but it's a little more finicky. I do like how defined the pattern is on the long end of this spot. Very cool. And just as we're setting up for a final shot here, I was just noticing that band of kind of light that we see, that ring of light that it emits kind of off this way from the lens. It is more pronounced at the wide end than it is at the narrow. So that's at the wide end. There's the narrow. Much finer line there. So that is the CF12 Fresnel from Aputure, which is not really a Fresnel, but functions largely like one. I think it's a great piece of equipment, something I am probably going to pretty much leave on the light all the time. I love the ability to focus it with one hand, the grab handles, the thin nature of it, the relatively lightweight build, despite it being a big old 12-inch piece of glass in there. The Barndoors are nicely designed, lots of control. I love that we can still stick a scrim in there, like a half scrim if we want to. I love it with the skid design, so I can leave it built with the lens and the Barndoors on it if I want, and just set that on the head cart, and it saves some build time and storage space. The only things to be mindful of are that kind of cast of light that goes out kind of almost down from the stand. I don't think it's a big issue, but it could cause potential issues in certain environments. This isn't really a fault with the lens itself, but just that idea of somehow figuring out a way to better balance the load over the mounting point on these fixtures, I think would be a great development in future iterations. Thanks for sticking around till the end. If you stick around just a little longer, we'll do a little BTS walkthrough of how we lit that first setup. But that's all we got for today. We'll see you on the next one. Quick walkthrough on how we lit this setup. Definitely harsher than a lot of scenarios that I would use, but sometimes you want that hard light to be a story element. You know, maybe it's a more gritty character, or for whatever reason, there are reasons to use hard light, and it can be a really powerful, emotional thing that adds to the story. In this instance, we used hard light because we're talking about hard light and shadows behind us, and all we did was we bounced this little ADC from Aputure with its Fresnel on there into this 4x4 mirror. That's an actual mirror, so it's beastly heavy, but gives us a nice reflectivity back. And makes it feel like that source is even further away, because it's, you know, that's not our source, it's here, so it's like making it that much further away, which makes it harder and more defined light patterns on the floor. We have this 2x1 Gemini fixture up in the grid with a grid on it to control the spill of that semi-soft light that's coming out of it. Our 1000C with the barrel reflector on it that's pushing light through that set flat behind us. And that's all the powered fixtures. We also have a passive bounce on this side, just an ultra bounce flop, to give a little more fill to the right side of my face, so it's not quite as dramatic as if we just had that key in this black box studio that we're in.